Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel and the continuing series on Ketu and Rahu, the South and the North Node, through the houses of Vedic astrology. We're going to continue with our discussion today of Ketu in the fifth house and Rahu in the 11th house. But before we do that, a word from our sponsor, which is me. If you'd love to learn some of these techniques, I actually have memberships which give you access to over 300 hours of Vedic astrology video courses. You can find those memberships through my website, which you will find linked above. So let's go into a bit of an explanation on Ketu and Rahu. I've done this in all the previous videos, but I like doing it because it keeps it relevant and keeps it fresh for the video that we're doing. Most people tend to understand Ketu and Rahu from the perspective of Ketu being related to previous lifetimes, and Rahu being connected to what we're meant to do in this particular lifetime in order to resolve the karmic incompletion that might be related to the previous lifetime. And Ketu and Rahu are that on a certain level, and that's a great understanding from which to begin our exploration of what the nodes are all about. But it's also very important to make knowledge very relevant to the present moment. In other words, how can I use this, right? So in understanding how you can use the information, here's another explanation of Ketu and Rahu, which is very, very vital to gaining an understanding of how the nodes actually work. Most people, when they begin their exploration of Vedic astrology, they learn about Ketu in the fact that it brings liberation. But Ketu cannot bring liberation without the expansion of Rahu. Here's a good way to understand it. When we have Ketu connected to a particular sign, particular planet, particular house, that area of life, to a certain degree, gets suppressed, right? It's something that we've done before. It's something that we know. On a certain level, it's a skill, but that skill somehow doesn't make us feel quite as fulfilled as it used to. And so we begin to grow a bit of discontent with whatever K2 is associated with. And then Rahu comes into the equation, and boy, does it make us feel that we've never grown that discontent. I'm only kidding. But Rahu does pull us out of our comfort zone and causes us to explore the other side of the axis so that we can incorporate a different understanding of, what we've been kind of holding on to or not willing to let go of, right? Or simply helps us to see things from a different perspective in relation to that. And that's what brings the development, and that's what brings the liberation. And if you'd learned to love more, or if you'd love to learn more about the configuration of the nodes in your own individual horoscope, I do also have astrological consultations that are specially suited for this particular approach, the karmic story consultation. And I also have a package called Saga of the Soul. You can find the link to the karmic story consultation at the link that you'll see above. So let's jump right in. So, what are some things related to the fifth house? Well, fifth house relates to inspiration. Fifth house relates to those things that we create. Fifth house also relates to dharma, or the path of righteousness, which should just naturally flow from the wellspring of naturalness which is within us, bro. I'm only kidding. Let's make it simpler. Dharma is something that should flow from within each of us. It's just our natural sense of ethics, the natural sense of knowing and understanding that is just part of who we are, right? So when we have K2 in the fifth, generally, if we want to look at it in the perspective of previous lifetimes, the person in previous lifetimes, or even earlier on in this lifetime, may have followed a path that was inspiring to them. simply for the sake that it was inspiring to them and it just felt natural and it felt right. Or they may have followed a path that they felt was dharmically correct, righteous, just natural, pure, based upon their ethics. And we'll come to another understanding too in relation to Ketu and the fifth, which is pretty fascinating. But first, let's talk about those the inspiration side of things. So K2 connected to the fifth, the person, as I was mentioning, would have followed a path that just naturally felt inspiring to them. They did it just for the sake of enjoyment, right? Like, sometimes we have creative pursuits, like we might like to sketch, or we might like to do astrology, or we might like to do some other things too that we don't want to let people know about, but we're not going to go there. But those things that just naturally inspire us. You could call them stupid people tricks if you really want to, but we also could just call them the natural artistic creative flow that is part of the human equation, those things that we just naturally feel driven to do, which is why the fifth house is also connected to Dharma, as I was expressing. Dharma is just a natural expression of your soul. The first house, fifth house, and the ninth house are what are called the dharmic houses. First house is just yourself, you know, yourself filled with your ideas. Fifth house is the expression of yourself and those ideas, which of course is going to relate to your ethics as well. So, K2 in the fifth house, a person can have a specific set of standards or way that they like for life to flow, or method by which they understand life. But here's another interesting fact, too. K2 in the fifth house, especially when it's there with Jupiter, can make us hold on to our children. Our children become a cornerstone of our life. And you may find a lot of people who have K2 in the fifth house, especially with Jupiter, they find themselves in positions at a certain point in life when their children move away that it's very difficult for them to begin to explore the other side of where they want to take things, unless, of course, the 11th Lord, whatever that might be, the planet that rules the 11th house, is actually strong in the person's horoscope. So if the person is driven by the path that just naturally inspires them, which just naturally feels correct, and they want to do it just for the sake of inspiration and nothing else, Rahu's job is to kind of step in and go, but hey, wouldn't it be nice to do this creative thing that you do, like astrology or art or sketching, or whatever the case may be, and get the approval of your peers? Or might it be nice to take your creative gifts and share it with the rest of humanity? Because you've done this thing of just doing it for your own enjoyment for lifetimes, or even just earlier on in this lifetime. Now maybe you need to take that and let other people share in it and let other people experience it too. Even if you're doing that sheerly for the sake of going, you know what? I also just need to do it because I enjoy it. Ultimately, the balance should be between I enjoy doing this and I enjoy sharing it with the rest of humanity. That's ideal. That's ideal. So when we're dealing with the concept of K2 in the fifth connected to Dharma, or the path of righteousness, Dharma eventually places us in a position, or it can, if we let the mind or the ego kind of step in and influence our relating to it. Dharma has a tendency to turn rigid, and we don't allow the exploration of other forms of seeing life. At that point, Dharma becomes somewhat dogmatic, and there's no room for growth. And so, for the person who has K2 connected to the fifth, Rahu in the 11th then needs to step into the equation and go, hey, here, because the 11th is the collective, right? Here are all these other different opinions in terms of how life works, right? Or you followed this path that feels dharmically correct, maybe it's now also okay for you to believe in your aspirations, to be a little more ambitious so you can experience both sides of life because you really need that dharmic side of life as well as the side of life that goes, hey, there's things I want to pursue or that I really want to go after. There's desires that I have. And again, with the nodes, as always, we're ultimately looking to find a balance between those two different sides. And once again, I'll mention if you'd like some help finding the balance between the nodes in your own horoscope, please schedule in an astrological consultation with me at the link that you'll see above. So let's talk about if Ketu in the fifth house is making the person feel more clingy towards their children, right? The person will, at a certain point in their existence, reach a period where they go, you know what? I have focused on my children, focused on making sure that every single iota of their life is set up correctly. And now I'm reaching that point where they're all grown up and I've never done anything for me. I've never done anything I wanted in my whole life. Well, then Rahu in the 11th causes them to go explore those things, causes them to interact with the rest of humanity, maybe even calls upon them to get involved in community events, which are also another 11th house instance. So these are just a few of the ways in which you can put together Ketu in the fifth and Rahu in the 11th. If you're someone who has Ketu in the fifth and Rahu in the 11th, I'd love to hear some of your experiences down in the comments section below. Again, please feel, free to share. And please also feel free to share this video with other people. And if you'd like to know more about the nodes in your own horoscope, once again, I do have several different levels of astrological service, all available through my services page, which you will find linked above. That's going to do it for this look at Ketu and Rahu in the 5th and the 11th. Until the next video, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.